Professor Liu, and she presented a different perspective, more like the church and state in historical perspective. In the Han Dynasty, you all have a relationship between the imperial court and also the Taoist groups, and also that kept tension. And hopefully, we can learn something from the past to apply that today. And Dr. Richeska from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, she will present to us different policies, how the different Pope from Pius XII all the way down to Francis have dealt with the so-called tension between church and state.
Many thanks to USCCA for this privilege to discuss the historical event of the emergence of Taoism in China. We have heard Dr. Feng talk about different situations in China, from Vietnam. And we heard last night and this morning the plenary speakers about the current situation. And so what I will do is quickly go through the most recent religious phenomena in China. And from that phenomena, I want to go to the roots of why it appears this way. And that roots can go back to 2,000 years ago, when Taoist two trends of Taoism emerged at that time. Even though it's 2,000 years ago, it has affected the religion-state relationship for the 2 millennia. Even today, at China, with the communist government, they consider themselves a very modern government, but they actually has that rich inheritance from the dynastic movements and all the dynastic ideologies. And so I think this is the context when we deal with the religion-state relationship in China. We need to bear this in our back burner. Okay, so the first thing we can look at, this one is done taken data from the official data. 1997, between 1997 2018, 21 years. And consider, last night, Myron said it's the golden, quote unquote, golden years. And we see that even the total number of people who claim they are religious affiliated doubled. And this is counting only the 5 official religions, not counting those people who didn't, I'm an atheist, but actually they practice ancestor worship, they practice, go to the shrines or local temples, or sometimes during, for example, I didn't eyewitness, but I know when I visit Taishan, there's a Confucius temple there. It was like nobody's there. But the month before the Gaokao in June, that temple is like filled with people. You don't even get the chance to get into it. And so you see these practices, they are not even counted in this number. Okay, next. But starting from 2014, we already witnessed some demolitions of religious constructions, buildings. There's a history there. In 1982, there's a so-called document 19. That's the draft of the regulation on religious affairs in China. And then in 2004, it becomes the very first official draft regulation. And then the most significant lately is the passing a revision in 2017 and the execution in 2018. The execution actually is very fluid in China, as you all know that. The law has been in existence for that many years, But how come it's happening in recent years? It's all depending on how the government want to execute all these regulations. Next. And so you see, starting in 2014, the demolition actually started with a lot of the, you can call it Buddhist temples, Taoist temples, or folk religion temples. It really depends on how you want to classify them. But this happened in Fujian. There are over 100 demolition people go to that village and doing the work. And so this is a picture showing one of the villagers was injured during the event. Next, please. The most significant, I think, is the demolition of so-called village earth deities. 土地庙. I think if I use Chinese, everyone knows what it is all about. Because the earth gods or earth deities are just so popular throughout the Chinese history and throughout Chinese land. So in Jiangsu, Gaoyou County, Jiangsu Province, Gaoyou County, in 2000, I believe it's 2018, I'm sorry. Let me double check my notes. 2019, most recent, 2019 in March, 5,911 these kind of shrines were demolished within 26 days. Just imagine the amount. So we think about all the Christian churches, buildings being demolished. Just compare the numbers, even just the numbers. You can imagine how this faith, the permeation of this faith among Chinese. And the next, this picture was taken in 2019. The removal of the crescent moon. Do you see that on the masks? And the next, the one, this is the most famous among the Christians, the demolition of that huge Christian church. So from these pictures, what I want to show to you is that the government's attitude or execution of these religious regulations, it's universal. It's not specific against Christianity. Okay? So with this in mind, then I can talk about the emergence of Taoism. This pattern actually started long ago. It's not just today. And this happened, next slide. This happened at the end of the Han Dynasty. So it's around, the Han Dynasty is from 25 to 2002 CE. So these two trends of Taoism, Taiping Dao and Wudou Mi Dao, they are two most prevalent Taoist movements at that time. But they represented two different models. And because of their distinct characteristics, led to their distinct faiths. And that's what I'm going to talk about, the state, religion relationship, how these really affected the later movements development. Next, please. So the emergence of Taoism, we must remember these mass movement or grassroots movement were not the very first one. Before Han Dynasty, at the end of Qing Dynasty, we already saw, we called it Chen Shen Wu Guang. These two were peasant movements. And the Han Dynasty's founder, Liu Bang, actually was part of it. And so this movement toppled the Qing Dynasty. And then in between the Eastern Han and Western Han, or the later Han, it depends on how the translation goes. There were the Chimei and Lulin. Those were peasant movements. Chimei means the red eyebrow. Okay, Lulin means the green forest. Means where they emerge from. These are the bandits. In the forests. They actually became mass movements, and they also toppled the very short new dynasty in between the two Hans, the Western Han and Eastern Han. The significance of Taoism in Taoist emergence was because its religious color. This is the very first grassroots movement that integrated faith or belief systems. So we're going to look at the belief systems. Next, please. By that time, and the last two emperors, during that time, according to the late Han annals, these two emperors, during the year 168, around that time, between 150 and 158, there were numerous earthquakes. And for the dynasty and for people with that kind of spirituality, these were omens for them. And then the emperor following him, during the year between 168 and 189, 21, 23 years, there were earthquakes, floods, drought, and lunar eclipse, all the omens, okay? And all these combined with the spirituality that has developed during the Han Dynasty, 400 years. These 400 years, people became pretty, using today's words, superstitious. They were more into the signs of the time or the signs of the nature, like what I just mentioned, earthquake, floods, drought, eclipse, all these unusual nature phenomena. And then adding to those were the imperial court factions and the local powerhouse, the heavy tax on people. So people said, we cannot live. We're hungry. We have no food. And that's why the uprising started. So Taiping Dao started with this guy called Zhang Jiao. He said, I found this book, the holy book, Taiping Jing, and using the ideologies in there to lure people. And people say, if we stay put, we die. But if we join the movement, the worst thing is we die, but we even get a little chance that we may live. So the movement grew fast, very fast, and I'm going to show you more details later. And the other one is Wudou Mi Dao. This guy is going more in a way of healing people because of the time. There's no medical knowledge like we have today. And so when he healed people, he said, you only need to pay me about 5 liters of rice. That's why it's called Wudou Mi. That's 5-liter rice. Okay, and that's how it got the name. And this guy goes more peacefully. He also grew fast. What he did, or his followers, his successors did, is that they established a utopian community. Okay, and so we see the two different models. Let's look at Taiping Dao. Its initial stage really also, is to try to cure people, try to persuade people you need to do good things in order to get good results in your life. And then when it grew, it occupied 8 states out of the 12 states of Han Dynasty. Just imagine that. And I'm going to, next, I'm sorry, I should have, I keep on going. Okay, that just what I just talked about. And next, see this map. You can see the Eastern Han Dynasty. They are moving more toward the east of the Chinese territory there. And I wish I had a pointer. The one on the right-hand side, the second one is called Qingzhou. Okay, thank you. Okay, this one, Qingzhou, that's where the Taiping Dao began. And see how quickly it grew and occupied. And remember, this area they occupy are the rich area, rich region, and most populous region. You see the other, so far away. That means less populated. Okay, next please. So what they did is that, the leader said, woo, I got 2/3 of the kingdom. I am going to do something different. And so he made up this slogan, the blue sky will die and the yellow sky will be erected. So yellow sky is him, Zhang Jiao himself. So he used this slogan and started his revolution. And of course, the Han Dynasty would not allow such thing. They already had 2 presidents. The peasant movements toppled the dynasty. So in 202, that this movement was totally erected, dissolute. So they are gone, dissolved. But its effect is that, it really weakened the Eastern Han Dynasty and led into the 3 kingdoms. Next, please. So this is the 3 kingdoms. That's the northern part, Cao Cao, which I will talk later. And next slide, we're going to talk about the next model. It's the Wudou Dao. Wudou Dao started long before Taiping Dao. And I already talked about, he moved to Sichuan, today's Sichuan, in 141. And what he did is require followers to repent, to confess their sins. That's very unique. And, the payment I already mentioned. And also, household shrines started from him. Okay, so these are the initial things that has been inherited into the Chinese religion until today. Okay. Now, what he did is a very special thing is that he divided his administration into 24 regions. So we see that he is a very organized administrator. Next, please. And 2 generations later, I'm going to go quickly. It's not his grandson, even though they're all in the same family. Zhang Lu. This guy also is a political genius. I can say that. He really stabilized Wudou Dao. He carried on this administration and continued to make this utopian community very stable. So the government, seeing this, why would you want to wipe out a community which is peaceful? So Cao Cao, who is the prime minister at that time, but later his son, usurped the Han Dynasty. Next slide, please. He decided to say, I'm not going to dissolve this whole community. I'm just going to immerse you into my power. And so Chinese say 招降, okay? So Zhang Lu said, okay, I want to preserve this community, and I'm going to submit my power to you. And so Cao Cao took over Zhang Lu's community and then put Zhang Lu in exile. Even though so, as if this Wudou Mi Dao has been dissolved on the surface, but the community got preserved and so continued. Okay, next, please. Oh, not yet. Sorry. So, previous slide, please. The one, okay. This one, I love to say the impact, and I'm going to probably skip the next few slides and go to the end really quickly. The impact of these two models, we notice that if you are really usurping the government, the worst case would be you would disappear from the earth. And the other path is, to join the government. Slide one. Go back. I'm not moving yet. Oh yeah, this one. Okay. So the pattern really shows up later. One part is that the government using the religious power to strengthen its own governance. Okay, sorry. I will keep it very short.
I'm sorry.
And the other one is when people really cannot tolerate the government, they want to go revolution. So this is the love and hate relationship that continue today. Okay, how many more minutes? 2 more minutes. Okay, and so we see these two models: religion serving the state, or the religious group usurping the government. But I think the impact also showed us another one is the indigenous utopian aspiration, which continue. For example, I think someone mentioned about 太平天国, the one that Taiping Heavenly Kingdom in the Qing dynasty. That really not only, was inspired by the Christian millennial concept, it actually already has the Chinese utopian aspiration in it. It's combined together. So it's another topic, but I just want to tell you that this impact of the Taoist emergence really has a huge impact on the state-religion relationship. And so, these are some of the religion ideologies behind the political system. So I'm not going to go through them one by one. The next one, please. So the Son of Heaven, about this, today's model, separation of church, which actually coming from West, how the religion-state relationship. And in today, there are two voices, the loudest voice. One from West, the separation. The other one is, let's preserve the traditional culture. But we do have other alternatives, right? So I'm not going to talk about the contemporary cases. Next, please. The Qigong, and I think we already heard from Dr. Johnson talking about the paranoid reaction from the CCP government. Okay, next, please. These are just some analysis of the recent or the continuation of the folk religion, or the Chinese religiosity. So I'm using three relationships to show it. The relationship, vertical one, to God or heaven, and the horizontal to people, and the relationship among the forms of society. Okay, so I'm going to skip all these. We don't have time, but these are some of the impacts of that movement on the religiosity, Chinese religiosity. And so these are the details on these three levels of relationships, with the spirits. For Chinese, more focus on the spirits. The next one, that's the power to cure. Okay, the relationship with the power from above. Next, please. And this one is, among people. And I'm not going to talk much now. And temple, since then, has become the social center for villages. So that's a very important thing when we think about a religious state relationship, or when we really think about how we want to go about our missional work in China. Okay, next, please. So the Chinese religiosity, this is my summary. Fear of death, fear of calamity, desire of control, and desire of love. Okay, next, please. I'm not going to go through the details, all the ways we're trying to overcome the fear, and next. And all the ways we want to fulfill our desire of love. Okay, next. So, Taoism characteristics. I think this is important for our understanding and what my summary here. Institutionalized folk beliefs. Okay, it's pantheon. It's interesting. It does involve sin and repentance, even though it is very much Chinese words 功德 means what's the word for that? Honor system. You do this, you gain that. The honor system. Okay, and house shrines I mentioned earlier. The pursuit of immortality and regimen. I think that's very, very, very popular among Chinese communities. As you go Taiwan, you go to China, everywhere. That's very popular nowadays. Millennial aspiration I mentioned, and they have very little interest in theologizing and systematization. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. That's the impact, and that's the characteristics. Thank you.
And I will start. Today I will be talking about the role of successive popes in the process of unification of the church in China. So I'm a little bit going back to the topics of connection between Vatican and the Chinese government. After the People's Republic of China was established in 1949, the Communist Party of China tried to break all ties of Christianity to the Western powers and promoted localization or indigenization of churches. One part of the claim for independence was cutting any support from the foreign Christian bodies. For Catholic Church, this was extremely problematic, as Vatican is a foreign body that is the center of the church. Another problem was that Pope Pius XII advocated anti-communist position and appealed on Chinese Catholics to boycott the new regime. Following this situation, Chinese Catholics supporting the party established the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association, and since then we have two Catholic bodies within China even until today. One, the official Patriotic Association, which is allowed by the government, and one, the underground church that since 1950s was still loyal to Pope. And in September 2018, as we heard, Popefrancis and the Chinese government signed a provisional agreement that was renewed in 2020 about appointment of bishop, which is signalizing a possible reunification of the Catholic Church in China after more than 16 years of division. The agreement is an outcome of many years of discussions between the Chinese government and Vatican. In this presentation, I will introduce the changing position of popes and towards the People's Republic of China. First, I will just very briefly introduce the historical development. I think that I don't need to go to the details, as I guess that you all are familiar with this. In 1951, all diplomatic relations between People's Republic of China and Vatican were broken, and foreign missionaries were expelled from China. In 1957, the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association was officially arranged, and it was recognized by the Communist Party, which and this new Catholic Association maintained administrative independence from Vatican. According to the association, there were just very few Chinese bishops appointed by the Vatican, and so they decided to solve the situation by electing its own bishops. However, the Vatican did not approve Chinese bishops ordained without the approval of Vatican, and they denied the recognition. So since then we have these two bodies, because we also have the underground church, which stayed loyal to the Pope. And from 1951 to 1987, there were no official dialogue between the Holy See and China. During this time also there was the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution, which made it very difficult for Vaticans to get any kind of dialogue going on with China. And in 2018 there was this new provisional agreement, and it was renewed for another 2 years in 2020. There are a lot of controversy following the provisional agreement. Many are criticizing the agreement because Beijing government does not allow all citizens to have true freedom. As we've seen in the previous presentation, this is something that is happening for a very, very long time, that the Chinese government wants to have control over the religion of its citizens. And some people are asking Pope to not seek any kind of cooperation with China, as Vatican should use its political power to promote religious freedom, and also should become an advocate for human rights. Also, many underground priests and bishops were disappointed with the agreement and confused by it, because they felt that it would not improve the situation for all Catholics in China. Also, there are some people highlighting that before his papacy, Pope Francis wrote a chapter called The Limits of Capitalism, in which he equaled capitalism with the promotion of selfish and unjust behavior. And then they kind of criticize him that he's supporting the provisional agreement mostly, or he made this provisional agreement mostly because he is supporting the communist regime. Throughout his papacy, he has advocated the state control as a controlling mechanism for creating more equal conditions for its citizens, and some even connected his ideas directly to Marx's notion of class struggle. As we can see on this caricature or cartoon illustrated by Paolo Carreri, some are criticizing or seeing Pope as someone who is promoting similar concepts as those of communists. In the picture, you can see that he's holding this banner saying that Jesus was also a communist. However, I think that we should not look at the provisional agreement from this point, because I think it's not only the doing of the Pope Francis and as an individual person or individual Pope, but it's something that we should be looking at from the historical perspective, and look at it from the point of view of Vatican as a body uniting the Catholic Church. So I will go back to each Pope since the establishment of People's Republic of China, and I will try to argue that the development or the agreement is the result of the continuous development. While the Pius XII was strongly against the idea of an independent Catholic Church under the direct leadership of communists, his successors had a little bit of different point of view. He was really against communist regime, not only in Chinese context, but especially in Europe. his position was clear because for him totalitarianism was incompatible with Catholic faith. He repeatedly stressed the need to fight communism. In 1949, Vatican published the decree against communism, which explained very clearly that Catholics would be excommunicated if they supported, I quote, the anti-Christian doctrine of communists. In the encyclical Sinarum Gentium of 1954, Pope Pius even promoted the ideal of martyrdom as part of the fight against the regime. He argued that it would be better to suffer physically than to defend or support the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. And during this time, the issue of bishop ordination was emerging because the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association started to select its own bishops in 1957. So in 1958, Vatican issued another encyclical reflecting the situation. And when Vatican refused to approve Chinese bishops, in the encyclical, the position was very, very clear. They were excommunicated and people were not supposed to support them. So since then, there are these two different ways of or bodies of Catholic Church within China, and the Chinese Catholic Church is not really united or Catholic, we can say, in this understanding. However, Pius' successors started to call for dialogue with China, and they tried to solve the situation. So John the 23rd took a different approach to countries under communist rule, especially within Eastern Europe. He even excused those who were supported the communist regime, or at least had some administrative functions within the communist regime, as according to him, they had no freedom to reject the Marxist ideology. He was seen as a pope of peace and justice, and he was a supporter of dialogue with communist regimes. His more open stance became clear in the Vatican II, when there was no document published which explicitly condemned communism. During the Second Vatican Council, he sought to open the Catholic Church to the modern world and to the countries beyond Europe. And this was very influential for the future development of the dialogue with China. But during this time, there was no negotiation with China. As for Pope Paul VI, he also saw more conciliatory path. And in 1965, he even sent a delegation to Beijing, hoping for a resumption of discussions concerning the situation of Chinese Catholics. However, within a few months, the Cultural Revolution began, and it stopped any progress. So while both of these popes tried to continue with some dialogues or create some new dialogues and solve the situation, it was not possible because of the position of China and what was happening in China. During Cultural Revolution, Vatican and the rest of the world received very little information about the situation of Catholics in China, and while because China was increasingly isolated, Vatican relaxed conditions for Chinese underground bishops and allowed them to appoint successors without a direct order of the Vatican. And as early as 1979, Pope John Paul II expressed his wish to for a reconciliation with China, and in 1987, he was the one that started new negotiation with the Beijing government. He was also following the positive attitude towards dialogue, and he tried to unite the Chinese Catholics in China, or at least follow this negotiation for unification. And at the same time, the government of China was seeking to improve its image around the globe and realized that the Vatican may be able to help. However, dialogue was far from straightforward, as John Paul II was at heart a conservative, and he was well known for his negative opinion of communism. He was a strong advocate of religious freedom, and he had experience of communist rule in Poland, and was very strong critic of Marxist ideology. However, I would suggest that his personal stance did not influence the position he took as a pope. He himself admitted that he followed two opposing strategies in his approach to communist countries: an official strategy of dialogue and a personal strategy of resistance. So then we can see that his personal standpoint was not the most influential part, but he realized that as a pope he's reflecting, or he should be reflecting, the position of Vatican as the center of Catholic Church. So his attitudes towards China could hardly be described as benevolent, but he still actively sought the unification of the Catholic Church in China. During his papacy, still there was this huge issue of election of bishops without papal approval, and these two ways or two bodies of church, Catholic Church in China. Pope Benedict XVI continued the gesture of goodwill towards the People's Republic of China. He saw reconciliation and unification of the Church as one of his main aims, and expressed his sentiments in a letter to Chinese Catholics in 2007. This letter was seen by many as the most important papal letter on China at the time. He stressed the unity as the most important demands of the Vatican, and it was quite clear that Vatican was sending this message that Vatican is open to negotiation. However, he was unable to maintain good relation with China, and was unable to really finish those kind of negotiations, because the Chinese part was not willing to continue the negotiations. And this leads us to Pope Francis and the provisional agreement. I think that it's clear that the provisional agreement is one of the most important events in the development of Sino-Vatican relations today, and while the exact content of the agreement remains unknown, we still know that the central issue is the election of bishops in China, and that the agreement grants authority to elect Catholic bishops to the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association, while the Vatican remains the right for veto. This is important because it is the first time that the Chinese government is admitting some kind of administrative power to the foreign Christian body, to Vatican. 4 days after the signing of the agreement, the Pope explained the agreement in the message that he sent to Chinese Catholics, and he was clarifying his motivation, and also conciliated 7 bishops elected without papal approval by the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association. He also appealed to the underground church to unite with the Patriotic Association, and he asked Catholic priests, underground priests, to seek an application for civil registration within the official church. Some unofficial underground bishops indeed stepped down from their posts in favor of candidates officially assigned by the Patriotic Association. Furthermore, in the letter, Pope appealed to Chinese Catholics to be good citizens, loving their homeland and serving their country. And in this appeal for patriotism, some scholars also see an appeal to support the Chinese Communist Party, which might be problematic, of course. Furthermore, the Vatican has continued to show People's Republic in China in a positive light, and Pope Francis himself has made some decisions to please the Chinese government. For example, during the Hong Kong protests, he decided to keep silence and so on. So we can see that the Vatican is trying very hard to do everything it can to unite the Catholic Church. And sometimes it might be a little bit problematic from the point of view that Vatican is also a political body, not only a religious body, but it has some political power and can be using it to promote religious freedom and human rights. However, while some suggest that the provisional agreement is a solely work of Pope Francis and that it is that it was created mostly because Pope Francis is very benevolent toward communist regime. I would argue that this is not really true and that we should see this in the wider context of historical and ideological development of the Catholic Church. And we should see the agreement as something that is, I think, not so surprising from the Vatican's part. This is something that the Vatican was trying for quite a long time to at least create a possibility of a united church in China, because now after the letter and after a lot of criticism, Pope Francis made another statement and said that those who don't want to join the Patriotic Association don't need to. So still there is this division, but it is not division from the Vatican point of view, because all the bishops in China now are united with Vatican. The division is not only from the Chinese part, because not all the bishops are still approved by the Communist Party or the Patriotic Association. So I think that the signing the provisional agreement is not a surprise, and the motivation of Pope Francis is clear to unite the church. This is something that the Vatican was aiming for a very long time. On the other hand, I think we should think about our focus on the Chinese part, because for China this is I would say a huge step to at least allow some part of decision making of foreign body, and we should be thinking about why China is doing it in the context of such a strong control that is getting worse every year, and maybe look at it from that point of view. But I will not be doing it today, and this is all from me. So thank you for your attention.
This is rather a comment, more than a question, but anyway, I can put in the question form. The question is this, and then I made a comment. On 22nd September 2018, a provisional agreement was signed. Now, according to the communique of Vatican, it is signed between the Holy See and China, while in the counterpart, the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in China, they proclaim that it is a provisional agreement signed between China and the Vatican. So they are the agreement binding for China and Holy See, or binding China or Vatican. I'll just give some more information. The Holy See is considered internationally, by international law, the supreme government organ of the Catholic Church, of which the members more or less 1.3 billion. So this is Holy See. The supreme head of the Holy See is the Pope, and he claims always successor of Peter. Now for the Vatican, it's recognized as a state of sovereignty only ever since 1929. These are two entities of international law. However, Vatican is such a tiny state, so all its administration, I can't say administration, or its relationships with other states is handled by the Secretary of State. And that Secretary of State belongs to the Holy See. Well, that is more or less the organization. So the question is that why two communications are different from the part of the Chinese from the Chinese side, they say this is agreement between China and the Vatican, while the Vatican says, well, this is the agreement between China and the Holy See.
I think that especially from Chinese part, it is quite understandable that they are saying that the agreement is with Vatican, especially because we don't know what's written in the provisional agreement, and Vatican said that it is not discussing the issue of Taiwan, but we think, or many of us, I think, are thinking about it, whether in the future the agreement will not be also discussing the issue of Taiwan, especially from the point of view of foreign policy of China, as they are trying to cut ties of other countries with Vatican instead of China. And I think that they are trying to show us that they are looking at it from the foreign affairs point of view, while the Vatican or the Holy See is trying to look at it from the religious point of view. But we really don't know what's the exact content, and it also can be only maybe the issue of terms. I don't know, but I would say that using the term Vatican is suggesting this connection to the foreign policy, looking at Vatican as a state, and doing this negotiation, which might lead in future to also supporting the state relations.
This is from Carolyn, and she says, Dr. Richetska, in your timeline for the Sino-Vatican relationship, you did not mention the 2007 letter of the Holy Father Pope Benedict. Wonder what impact that letter has resulted in, and if and how it paved the way for the provisional agreement of 2018.
Thank you for the question. I didn't have it in the timeline, but I think that I mentioned it in the presentation later on, that it was very important, especially from the point of view of continuing the negotiations. I think that the work of Pope Benedict was very important in the process of negotiation, but at the same time it didn't really progress that much. Especially there were some issues with also there was already how to say they were trying to appoint some bishops, and the Vatican was supposed to those elected bishops to appoint them, and then it just gets very messed up, I would say, very clearly. And the Chinese part started to back up, but I think Pope Benedict was really trying hard to find a way to negotiate. I don't really know what was the issue, because I don't really know what was the issue from the Chinese part that started this, that they didn't want to continue with the negotiations. I think that he was not as willing to be so positive towards Chinese regime as Pope Francis is today, but still I think it is a long-term negotiations that were happening between various popes, and that it's not only the doing of the Pope Francis. And I think that the way how Pope Benedict was looking at the negotiations, where it was very important for the next step, that is the provisional agreement. But again, it is very difficult to say, because we haven't seen the provisional agreement, and I haven't seen any kind of official statements from the previous dialogues. So I don't know what happens in those negotiations. But as far as for the letter, it was very important, and it stated very clearly that Vatican wants the Chinese Catholics to be united, all of the Chinese Catholics to be united with Vatican, and he saw this as his primary goal.